We're back in Elkridge, Maryland at Speed Motors. Hopefully you enjoyed the video that we recently released on this Carrera RS. We've got another treat for you today. We've got, maybe to an untrained eye, just a slew of different color 911s, more importantly 964s. But as the title says, these are actually very special 964s. Be sure to log into your YouTube account, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a video. Best of all, it's free to do so. This video is presented with the help of Sloan Motors, buying, selling, and consigning the best examples of vintage Porsches in the world. We're going to be looking at the 964 model and how this model brought back to us the RS models. It had been 20 years since they used RS. And we're going to show you all the different versions in 964. So here we have a 1990 964. For those with a keen eye, this car probably could qualify as an Unstock vehicle because it's not exactly as delivered from the factory. A quick look, you'll notice the headlights, the mirrors, and a couple other things that this owner has modified on the car. But regardless of that, let's talk about how this car kind of was such a big change from the previous model. Bob, I think you said, what, 80% of the 964 was new compared to a G-body?
Yeah, Porsche says 85%, Boo. So this is a completely different 911 than the Carrera that preceded it from 1984 basically till the end of '88. The biggest change that you see is suspension is now full coilover. And so we've gotten rid of the torsion bars and we've moved into a modern era. And then Porsche took the venerable 3.2 and they enlarged it, and now the 964 gets a flat 3.6. It produces 247 horsepower in the United States, more torque, just as reliable. So you have a better platform, more power, and the G50 gearbox. Incredible cars. And imagine that's from one year to the next.
And I've had the opportunity to drive this car and compare it to my 87. It drives much more modern. The shifting is a lot easier. This car actually has power steering as opposed to my 87. The HVAC in this car is also much better than my 87.
It is. Everything about the 964 was literally a quantum leap forward from the Carrera. The 80s were a little bit of a stagnation for the Porsche 911, to be quite frank. Porsche was deciding, are we going to continue to develop the 911, or are we going to go after these water-cooled front engine, rear transaxle 50-50 weight balance cars? And so the 80s, the 911 got a little stuck.
It was a tough time for Porsche, and I think that's probably a perfect segue to the Fly Yellow RS that we're looking at, because back then they were having a tough time selling cars. And maybe calling it a marketing ploy isn't exactly correct, but you know, many a times the close ties that we have with Porsche comes to the Porsche Club America and its members and says, what can we do better? What can we do different? What can we introduce to the market to possibly introduce more sales or create something that you really need as a market? Introduce the RS America.
The RS America. So Porsche Club was instrumental in this. The Carrera RS had already been introduced to the rest of the world, but unfortunately the United States, for various different reasons, safety being the primary, simply couldn't get the rest of world Carrera RS. So Porsche went to you guys and said, listen, what do we do? And the RS America was born. Something that was more driver-oriented, more spirited in terms of performance. It was cheaper, ultimately, which is amazing because, of course, these are much more coveted now than a standard C2. And it was designed to be an iteration of the RS moniker, as you called it.
And I guess, I wasn't obviously at that meeting, but I can only imagine when Porsche came to us and said, what do you want? And we're sitting at the fence there going, oh, we love the RS you have in the rest of the world. How can we get one of those? But because of what the RS was and the sort of the options or the lack of options on that car, it was not legally able to come to the States. So we kind of said, man, we like some of that stuff, and that's what they put into this car.
Yeah, and amazingly enough, the RS America, as I said, it was actually cheaper than a normal C2. So in 1993 and 1994, Porsche built 701 RS Americas. The RS was different, but very similar to the standard C2. Depending on who you talk to or what you read, the RS was anywhere from about 80 to 100 pounds lighter. So we know from all of our discussions of unsprung weight and sprung weight that gives the car 8 to 10 more horsepower out of thin air with exactly the same M64-01 engine. So Porsche's venerable G50 gearbox, same gearbox. But then what Porsche did is they whittled away and they made things lighter in certain areas. They reduced some of the amenities to reduce the price of the car. So what you see is distinctively from the exterior, you see RS America Cup 1s. These are made out of aluminum. They're very specific to the RS. Now you could get these later as an option on a C2, but again, basically a 965 part number. The RS America had 7s and 8s. The 911 Turbo had 7s and 9s. So let's move along. On an exterior visual immediate cue, you see this fixed tail. Very similar to a Carrera tail with a few little differences, but instantly visually different from any other C2 we've seen.
One of the best tails they've ever made.
I would have to agree. The RS America insignia on the back, very specific to this car. And then you saw the RS insignia on the side of the car as well. So moving into the car, you'll recognize these door panels later when we move into the rest of the world Carrera RS.
So I noticed the speakers on the door. What were, that's one of the options, I'm assuming, that you could have gotten radio delete and not have that.
Right.
What other options?
RS Americas came with a whopping 4 options. You could get limited slip, you could get air conditioning, you could get a radio, and then you could get a sunroof. So this particular car is one of 4 that was ever painted in paint to sample Ferrari Fly Yellow, and it came with 3 options from the factory: the limited slip, the air conditioning, and the sunroof. And then I put in a correct CR1 radio. So ultimately it has 4 options.
And what were the standard colors for an RS America?
Standard colors were red, white, black, and midnight blue. And then you could, for a slight upcharge, order silver, metallic silver.
Oh.
But then, as I said, there were 6 cars that were specially ordered paint to sample. There were 4 Ferrari Fly Yellow cars, there was a Maritime blue car, and then an Aventurine green car. So only 6 of the RS Americas were special order, special colors.
Now I have to say, probably one of the most aggressive seats Porsche has ever placed in a production vehicle is this seat here, and this is special because it has a non-leather insert.
Yeah, non-leather insert, real high bolsters on the side. It's amazing to ride in, very, very comfortable, electrically adjusted in terms of the cant up and down of the seat base, and then manually adjustable in terms of the rear back of the seat.
Speaking of the back seat, there is none.
It's true. One of the things that Porsche did to try to save weight with the RS America was to eliminate the back seat. What they did in its place is a small deck that you see here with some storage underneath. Very, very practical.
It's kind of ironic though. They took the back seat, and I don't know how much a seat pad and a rear upright seat weight-wise, but then they put this bulky thing in there. I can't imagine the net weight savings was very much.
I wouldn't think so either. And honestly, Vu, in 1994, after a bit of complaining from the US market, Porsche put the back seats right back in. So the 93s are somewhat special in that they're the only RS Americas that actually had the back seat removed.
Ah, okay, gotcha. All right, so let's move to the frunk. We can pop that and take a look and see what's different under here.
Sure.
Interestingly, when I mentioned earlier that I had the opportunity to drive that C2, what made that car feel more modern for me was the fact that it actually had power steering. But when you go to an RS, they took that away again.
It's true. The first 911 with power steering was the 964. And to save weight and not lose parasitic drag in terms of pull from the engine, Porsche eliminated the power steering on the RS America. In addition, you see here a very different carpet set. This is a super lightweight carpet set specific only to the RS America. And you can see Porsche has a little strap where you put all your books up front.
And as compared to the C2, you don't have the pockets and such, the extra or however.
Right. Well, and the purlin is much thinner. You know, if you were to pick this up or pick up a normal C2 carpet set, maybe it's a pound difference, but again, remember, Porsche adds all those pounds together and you end up with 80 to 100 pound difference.
Yep, yep. And if you've ever driven your car at a track at speed with or without an instructor, that, 80, 150, 160 pounds really starts to make a difference. Now, is this the same carpet that will be carried out in the interior as well?
Yeah, the RS America had thin carpet inside as well. Again, maybe a pound or two difference, but all of that adds up. So let's move, as we're taking a look, you talked about the racetrack, let's take a look at the braking system and what slows this car down. What you'll notice is it's exactly the same braking system that a normal C2 has in 1993. 4 piston calipers up front and 4 piston calipers in the rear. Exactly the same rotor size and piston size of those calipers as the normal car.
Now, there's been mention of seam welding in these cars. Is that true?
Yeah, there's a lure, a fascination, if you will, with the first 50 or so RS Americas ever produced. And At Speed actually happened to have number 035, so the 35th RS America ever produced. And it was a completely original car when it came to us. And we looked all over that car. Not a single stitch of seam welding was on that car. So I hate to burst the bubble, but
don't shoot the messenger.
No seam welding, that's right.
So we'll see the next iteration of the RS that has seam welding, but for those that don't know what seam welding is, what is it and where do they do it on a car?
Generally, well, seam welding is you take 2 panels that are, let's say, spot welded, and what you'll do is you'll run a weld right along the edge of those 2 panels so that instead of
2 points.
Yeah, instead of attaching at this point, and this point, those panels attach for the entire length of that weld.
Structural rigidity.
Structural rigidity, there you go. It doesn't add much weight at all, and what Porsche did is they put it in all the spots where the suspension would potentially connect or wherever the body would be tweaked and moving, and then that would help the stability, the rigidity of that chassis.
Gotcha. So we looked at the interior, but I'm not sure we mentioned the door pulls. Like, was this the first time a strap door pull was introduced?
Well, there were straps in the race cars for sure, straps in the 73 Carrera RS lightweight, but nothing that really looked like this short pull strap. So from a production standpoint, I think it was.
That's pretty cool, because I know so many cars today and even people retrofit their cars to have this sort of iconic door strap. And
Yeah,
of course it has to color match.
Oh yeah, and I'll admit, I put the yellow strap on. It came with black.
Yeah, but it does look good.
It does look good.
It does look good. Since we're having the camera at that angle, looking at the transmission, so same airbag as the C2. Transmission, is that the same as a C2? Is there any difference?
Yeah, this is a G50 transmission. The gear ratios are exactly the same, right out of the stock C2. You'll notice that the steering wheel is a standard C2 with a US-based airbag. And we'll notice a big difference when we go to the rest of world car in a few minutes. That will stand out right away.
Now, were these cars like ordered by individuals and there was an allocation, or did Porsche build a run of them and just like sprinkle them through different dealerships?
In 1993, amazingly enough, these cars were sitting all over the United States. Porsche was having a heck of a time selling the RS America. It was cheaper than a normal C2, more aggressive. It fit all the things that Porsche Club asked for, but it languished. And strangely enough, late in the run, Porsche actually put a $5,000 rebate on these cars to get them out the door.
You heard that right. There was a time when Porsche placed a rebate on a car. I can't think of when.
Incredible, unbelievable.
Other than this car, I can't remember when they ever put a rebate on a car. And so as much as we appreciated the ability to provide input and the enthusiast spec that we gave them, but when it came to selling them, it was actually a tough sell because it was a little
It was more Spartan. Yeah. I mean, imagine. And now, of course, today, we pay for Porsche to take everything out.
They still got us.
They
still got us in the long run.
Yeah. So let's take a look at the engine. As Vu and I talked about, this is a standard M64-01 engine. So they didn't do anything different to this power plant. They just made everything a little lighter. So we have standard engine, standard intake. In this particular case, you can see the air conditioning system is there. The engine mounts are the standard C2 sort of rubber style mounts.
And when we look at the rest of the world RS later, they're going to have like semi-solid.
Yeah, semi-solid mounts. Again, this is very, very similar and very close to a standard C2, but visually strikingly different, especially with this tail. And then small little features, you know, the door cards, the seat, the lightweight carpeting, the lack of rear seats, the lack of powered windows.
No power steering.
No power steering. So it's an enthusiast car, but not to the nth degree.
Now, in driving, you've driven both cars. Is the experience of driving them that much different?
Well, whenever you have a lighter weight car, you get more visceral response out of it. There's just no question. So no matter what, this is lighter than a normal C2. The 17-inch rims help a lot. You know, the tires are springs, and so if you can change that compression rebound ratio, better handling. The other thing is the RS America came standard with the MO30 Sport suspension package. So, add all that up, yes, they're different. Is it night and day? No, but absolutely different.
But it's certainly a progression towards a more aggressive, more sporting intent.
Right, and then the next progression is the real big one from the RS America to the rest of world Carrera RS.
And let's take a look at that one.
All right.
So let's move on from the RS America over to the rest of world Carrera RS. And if I'm not mistaken, you said the RS America is actually more rare.
It is. As we talked about the RS America, there were only 701. The Carrera RS, at least the normal street version, there are 1,916 of these. So more rare, is the RS. Significantly more special is the rest of the world Carrera RS. So let's start with the front, the whole body. Basically a 964 chassis, but now Porsche, for the first time with a Carrera RS, they seam weld things. And you and I talked about that. Seam welding is you weld together body panels in certain structural areas to give even more torsional rigidity.
Right.
Yes. And so the body is a normal 964 body. But with the Carrera RS, rest of the world, we have an aluminum hood, again, to save some weight here. So let's go inside the car, and then you'll begin to see differences right away.
Before we take a complete look inside, while you're there, I can't help but notice this does not have a sunroof. So were all of these non-sunroof cars?
Yes, the rest of the world cars were all no sunroof. Sunroofs, when you cut off part of the roof, torsionally you've damaged the ability for the car to be as strong. And then also a sunroof is heavy.
Sure.
And you have weight at the highest point on the car, the worst thing you could do.
And you also lose headroom.
You lose headroom,
Yeah.
exactly right. Yes.
And as you walk towards the front, let's not forget how special, although visibly these wheels look just the same.
They do.
But they are very special.
They look like Cup 1s, but holy mackerel, these are magnesium, significantly lighter than the aluminum. On the downside, a bit prone to cracking. And then you can see with Damon zooming in here, a much larger caliper. So we're actually looking at 911 turbo brakes here up front, 322 millimeters.
And how about the back?
The back brakes are straight from the 964 Carrera Cup car, 299 millimeters, also a 4-piston caliper. So up front, let's take a look at things.
Now, I did notice the lights are a little bit different.
Yeah, they are. What Porsche did here is they sort of covered an area where in the United States we'd have a fog light, but all they have is a cover here. There really isn't an active light, and again, this is all for weight savings.
Let's take a look under here.
Once you open the hood, wow, a lot different. So we've gotten rid of even the hood struts for weight savings. There's a little aluminum bar here. Porsche has gotten rid of all of the carpeting. This particular car has an aftermarket strut tower brace, which is fine, but this actually didn't come with this car as stock. And then if you look even further down along the front rail here, we have a factory main shutoff switch.
And that came as delivered from Weissach.
Yeah, and again, there's some debate on that. I can tell you for certainty that this panel came from Weissach, but I've seen them wired up and not wired up.
Oh,
and I can't go out on a limb and tell you 100%, but I can tell you that everything was set up to have that type of cutoff switch.
And you can see even, you know, the amount of carpet in front here is less.
Right. Everything's for weight savings. But amazingly enough, all the fuel system is exactly the same. They even left the windshield wiping and washing bottle in there. So Porsche had done an excellent job with the 964 of designing everything. And now what you do is you start weight savings and you have a very, very special car.
And for those that have a keen eye looking here, they're looking for the brake system difference in this car versus an RS.
Yeah, and the braking system was a 4-channel system directly from the C4. Very, very different from what we got, unfortunately, in the United States, and very advanced.
And these are also special that these were not available in the US, and many of us have upgraded the headlights of our Porsches to these.
Yeah, the H4s. Just a much better lighting system, longer reach, better in every sense.
Very cool.
Yeah, unfortunately, and we'll talk more about this, but unfortunately this car was never offered in the United States. There are a bunch of reasons for that, but suffice it to say, unfortunately we didn't get the best of the best in 1992.
but now they are able to be in the States because of their age and they're being imported.
It's true. After 25 years, DOT, EPA is significantly different regulations. And so, for instance, this car I brought in from Germany, along with its cousin, the NGT or Clubsport version.
Now the specialness of this car continues as we take a look inside. We'll have Damon come around. Now the seats in the RS America were special to it, but you can really see sort of the race intent of this car by the seats alone.
Oh, they're amazing. These are Recaro race seats. Exactly what you would see in a pure race car, except for Porsche covered them with leather and made them a little bit more comfortable, but the entire profile and the whole body of the seat is pure race.
And just the way they look, I mean, everyone would love to have a set of these.
Oh, it's
in their
so
car.
true, so true, Vu. And like the cool thing is, those pads actually are removable, so you could mix and match different colors inside these cars. If you wanted a purple center, you could have a purple center, or a gray front, you could have a gray front. So there was a lot of individualization that could be done to these RSs.
And because this was a rest of world car, is that the reason why it doesn't have an airbag?
Yeah, all of the RS's rest of world cars came without any airbag system. That's the biggest reason that this car could never come to the United States, was a safety issue. So when you take a look in there, you're looking at lightweight carpeting, you're looking at the lack of airbag, you're looking at the door cards that we have seen on the RS America, so things are a little bit familiar, but everything driver oriented is very different. And then when you look at the door cards from the back here, you see, hey, wait a minute, there's a wind-up window there.
My kids, I'm not so sure if they know how to use that.
It's true. Yeah, I'm not sure mine would either. But again, what Porsche is doing is weight savings. You have no electric motor there. You have a wind-up window. They use thinner glass on the rear quarters and the rear large window. And so the whole weight savings theme continues with this car.
Now I'm looking at the center stack here, no air conditioning.
No air conditioning. There was a model that offered air conditioning. It was called the Carrera RS Touring version. There were 76 touring versions made. They actually offered air conditioning as an option. They did not use this extremely aggressive race seat. They had a seat very, very similar to the RS America, and they had more accoutrements.
Now I also see that this car has the back seat delete, but it doesn't need or have the tray.
Right, yeah. In the United States, we said we want weight savings, but wait a minute, I need some more storage space. So they took out the back seats and they put back in a tray to sit things on. With the Carrera RS, you've got everything removed and lightweight carpeting, that's it.
Now is it true that the shifter in these cars are a shorter ratio than compared to the cars?
You mean the gearbox itself or the actual shift, the shift distance?
Both.
Yeah, the gearbox itself has a different first and second gear, so faster acceleration. And then the shifter itself, if you were to compare it, you'll notice that the shift stalk itself is much longer because you're dealing now with a race seat and you need that shifter higher up to be able to go through all 5 gears. You'll really see that when we move on to our next car, which is the NGT or Clubsport version.
Now, as far as weight difference between these two, this is probably the most significant difference as we move today from model to model.
Yeah, it really is. There's a lot of debate on the RS America, but suffice it to say, even stripped down, it's probably only 80 to 100 pounds lighter than a normal C2. This car is about 300 pounds lighter than a normal C2.
Wow.
Actually, everything that's out there says 285. So if you think about that, instantly, you just got 30 horsepower out of nothing, thin air, because now the car is lighter.
It's all about power to weight ratio.
Power to weight ratio, there you go.
All right, well, if you want to know where do you go from here, let's go to the Clubsport, because we're going to improve on that power to weight ratio, I think.
As if you could get better, we have an even more aggressive, better driver-tuned car that's coming up.
So if this 92 RS isn't special enough for you, let's move over to this one. This is the RS Clubsport, also a 92. And Bob, to the casual look, I mean, stance is about the same, obviously color's the same. And the formula that Porsche used with this car moving over to this Clubsport is actually a formula that they're still using today. The GT3 Clubsport program, the GT4 Clubsport program, where they're taking the engine and transmission of the standard street car, putting it into a more driver's education, track focused car, and being lightweight, I think, is probably the key with this one.
It is, Vu, it is. I mean, you hit it right. They're using the street engine so that everything is consistent, everything is reliable, parts are available, they're tested, true. This is the same M64-03 engine that this car has. So what they did here is, okay, let's make it even more aggressive. Let's get rid of all the sound deadening. Let's get rid of the ticking over our head for, you know, the roof. Let's put in race seats. Let's put in race harnesses. And then let's tie the whole car together with a matter cage.
Well, let's take a look from front to rear, as we did with this car. Again, from the front, looks quite standard compared to this car. We talked about the wheels earlier. These are the same magnesium wheels that's on this car.
Same braking system, 911 turbo brakes up front, cup car brakes in the rear. So everything so far is identical.
All right.
Just as you said, visually you look from the outside, and if you didn't see the cage, you would think it was the same car.
Right. So now as you peek through the window, some would even say, well, maybe this guy or gal took all the carpets out and it's a DE Focus. But keep in mind, this is a DE or a track-driven Focus vehicle that the factory did.
Yeah, yeah. And we talked about how limited the normal RS was. This is even more limited. 290 units total were built in 92. So let's start up front again.
Yeah, let's pop over.
And you'll see, I mean, it's a formula we recognize from the other cars. We've got an aluminum hood, just like the standard street RS. We've got basically no carpeting. We have a main shut-off switch from the factory, exactly the same fuel tank and delivery system, and exactly the same suspension.
Now you were mentioning, or we talked about the setup here in both cars as being available or existing, but not necessarily wired up from the factory. So do all these cars came factory wired?
Yeah, the Clubsport cars came factory wired.
Okay, and the other ones may or may not have been.
The other ones, there's some debate on that. And so it's difficult to say absolutely with Porsche, but the other cars had all of these support trays in place for sure. I've seen them both ways, so I won't go out on a limb and say absolutely.
Okay. And since we're here, suspension is the same.
Suspension's the same. We're 40 millimeters lower than the standard C2. We've got the same basic compression and rebound rates. We've got the same spring rates, etc. So very, very, very similar to the winning formula that was the street Carrera RS.
I guess that's what's a little bit different with the sort of the recipe of Clubsport in today's cars, because
Right.
the GT3s Clubsports and the GT4 Clubsport, their suspension is a little bit more aggressive compared to the street car.
It is, and remember, this is 1992. And so Porsche is very sensitive to what the Carrera RS name means. And it means much more aggressive. It means really something driver oriented. And so there wasn't as much of a concern about a little bit harsher, but something that is track focused. So the big thing that what you find with this chassis is, all right, we have all the same seam welding, but you inject a fully welded matter cage onto a chassis, and it changes the entire dynamic of the car. And everything is more aggressive now.
And here's where the details really make this car stand apart from the other one as Damon's panning in.
Well, you can see, all right, so all of a sudden there's no carpeting. Well, you're right, you could have just torn the carpet out, but this is from the factory. You've got a wooden board for your feet to touch. Why wood? Because wood isn't slippery in the rain, it's relatively light. It's easy to replace if you have a problem. We've got no sound deadening in this car. And all of a sudden you see 2 Recaro race-only seats. So you know instantly what this car is made to do, and that is potentially go to the track, driver's ed, much more aggressive than the normal street Carrera RS.
And this car, although being a 1992, also has a non-airbag steering wheel.
It does, and that's one of the big things that kept it out of the United States, beside being too low and not having the right padding and all that kind of stuff. But a safety issue with the lack of airbag just would never come through the EPA and DOT. It just wouldn't make it. Now,
you had mentioned the driving experience of this vehicle versus RS with all the sound deadening removed, the lightweight things that they, I guess, the thing that they tried to pull out of the car or extract from the car to make it more visceral.
Right.
How much of a difference is it when you're driving?
It's stunning. So in my older days, I raced a 964 Cup car. This is as close as you get to a 964 Cup car. I mean, quite literally, you could take this and put it next to a 964 Cup, and in general, barring a few details, you would not notice a difference. It's incredible.
And you can't help but notice the fire suppression system in this car. Was that delivered from the factory?
Well, that's a Halon system, so whatever this system is, it is aftermarket or much later in production. But I believe there was an option where you could literally have a hand fire extinguisher added to the car.
Oh. And I noticed that the e-brake, I mean, this is a track car, but it still has an e-brake.
Can you imagine? You're at the racetrack and there's your emergency brake.
It's useful.
It
you don't
is.
have to chalk the wheels.
I hear you.
And Damon, I don't know if you could see or pan up to the roof area and just notice at how well built this matter roll cage and how tightly it goes up against the roof line. I mean, it really is a work of art.
You'll even notice the matter sticker on the cage sitting right inside here.
Now, this is the same cage as in a Cup car, but you said it doesn't qualify or something like that.
Well, it sort of does, it sort of doesn't. Each Cup car cage was certified, and Matter would put a sticker on that says, hey, this is a Matter cage, this design is certified, but literally each Cup car itself had a particular number, and that was in the logbook of the Cup car.
And I'm looking over by the key area. I hate to pull you back around, Damon, but that red pull, that is also a factory piece?
Yeah, that's your main cutoff.
Okay.
So again, the Clubsport option got really close to the Cup cars.
Mm. And while you're there, Damon, pan to the left. Everyone knows about RS door panels, but usually there's still electrical switches to control your window. And on this car,
well, there isn't. All RSs, except for the Tourings, where it was an option, all RSs are manual crank. The factory did that because of the weight savings. Mm-hmm. There's a motor in there for electric windows, and the darn thing's a lot heavier than a manual crank. But the amazing thing is, let's go back to the engine compartment.
Yep.
The amazing thing is here we have an NGT or Clubsport version, and voila, basically the exact same engine setup as on the quote-unquote street normal Carrera RS. So the factory isn't reinventing the wheel. What it's doing is, with this option, it's really changing the chassis. And it does that primarily with the addition of a fully welded cage. That ties the entire chassis together. Now you have completely different performance characteristics, but as Porsche with its brilliance did, you don't need more power, you just have a better handling car.
Right, and also the added bonus of if the car needed to be serviced by someone that can service a standard street car, they could service your track car because it's essentially the same motor and transmission
It's
combo.
true, yeah. And the M64-03 engine was immensely reliable.
Now, we talked about how this car is so much about weight savings in terms of what they took out of the car, but they did add a few things. So the weight difference between the two could surprise people.
It's true. Once you add the cage back in, if you look at a street Carrera RS, the numbers that are published out there, even from the factory, range from about 2,705 pounds up to about 2,715 pounds. This car is, again, published numbers, 2,690 pounds. So not much difference.
A good lunch.
Yeah, good lunch. But now you have all the torsional rigidity of this cage, and of course the safety that goes with it. And voila, you have a significantly more aggressive car.
Well, Bob, thank you so much for allowing us to take our viewers through 4 iterations of the 964. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Be sure to like and comment on the video, and also subscribe. See you next time.